Okay, then I am going to get started with today's webinar. I will start by sharing my screen. There we go. Okay. I'm going to head over to my slides, which I have here. Oh, I don't need advanced sharing options. So welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about the projection map. Again, we already talked about the projection map last week. And at this point, we wanted to apologize for a little glitch that we had last week with the ending, towards the ending of the webinar. My colleague Ilias's internet let him down and he had to drop out. So we're going to cover what he was going to cover at the end in the beginning of this session. And again, apologies for anyone that was inconvenienced by that. As usual, feel free to ask any questions in the chat and my colleagues will get back to you. Today we have Olivia and Ilias with us, so they will be happy to reply to any things that might come up in the chat. So let's get started. As a first topic, I'd like to cover the adding and editing of GeoJSON. So if you're not using a blueprint that we have in our template chooser, so if you go to templates, app.flourish.studio/templates, then we have all these starting points already, but we also have this option to upload your own GeoJSON. And the reason you would want to do that is if you cannot find what you're trying to show here. So maybe you have different regions or just a city, or you need to use regions that your company outputs because of specific borders that might be sensitive and things like that. So then there's always this option, this blank upload your own, and you can just click that and then you'll see it kind of loads the projection map interface, but it's empty. And so if you switch over to the data tab, you can just upload your GeoJSON. I have prepared one that's extremely large just to show what happens with that, because that's kind of a typical thing that you might need to troubleshoot. So you should be able to just drag it in like I did there. It's a bit slow now. The reason for that is that I just selected an extremely large file. Let's just take a look how large that is. Yeah, so 134 megabytes. We normally recommend using GeoJSON files up to about 5 megabytes. So this is definitely way too big. Now I just accidentally clicked out of my window, but basically at some point it finally did load the interface that we get to further upload our GeoJSON. But while I have that wait, I will show you a way to make it smaller, because this is of no use. This is way too slow. It will not only be slow uploading and editing. Now, finally, we can see it asks if we want to import it. We say yes, continue, and continue again. But as I already mentioned, this is way too slow. Luckily, we have a very useful tool that we can use and that is free to use for anyone, which is called MapShaper. And this allows you to just drag in your GeoJSON and simplify it if it's too large or too detailed. That will make it not only faster for you within Flourish, but also faster for your users and for the page to load. So I'm just going to pull in my large GeoJSON here again. You'll notice it's even a bit slow importing to MapShaper. It's just really a heavy one. And then you'll see in MapShaper, you have this simplify command, and then you can hit apply and just drag this little lever, toggle, scrubber across. So I'm going to make it quite a bit smaller because I noticed that this is a really big file. Now you'll notice that we have some line intersections, which means that because of my simplification, so what I'm doing is I'm just making all the borders and all the shapes a little bit less pronounced. There are some line intersections, and you can easily repair that in MapShaper as well by just clicking repair. Now, my GeoJSON should be about 10% of the size that it was when I started. So I'm just going to export it now and select GeoJSON as my export format, as that is the format that goes into Flourish. And now if I head over to the one that I was just loading, it's actually still loading. So we can see the shapes are being pulled through, but it's still quite sluggish and it's not reacting very well. So I'm just gonna create a completely new one and show you that that should be a lot faster now. It looks like it just loaded as I was leaving. So I'm gonna take the blank one again, head over to data and then upload it there. And now that shows up faster and we can see the data showed up faster. And maybe I could simplify it a bit more because it still seems to be a little bit slow. It should, however, show up. There we go. Yeah, so this one, I suppose you could even simplify a bit more because it's still really big. Let's take a quick look maybe at the file size of this one. Yeah, still 16.2 megabytes. And as I said, we recommend about 5. So you can just simplify that down until you have a nice small GeoJSON. So that is the first kind of special case that I wanted to show when you have really large, sluggish GeoJSON files. So you can simplify that in MapShaper and inspect it again to check that the size is okay. In general, you won't have to do stuff like that. I probably should have started with a bit of an easier example where everything just worked. That is also the case sometimes where you find a GeoJSON file online, you drag it into Flourish, and then it should display. But that's okay, as we got it to work now with our simplified version. Another issue that sometimes arises when adding your own GeoJSON is that you can't find a GeoJSON in the first place. So sometimes you can find shapefiles or KML files. If we look at this GeoPortal from the government of the UK, we will see that it's possible to download this in a shapefile and a KML file, but it does not have the GeoJSON option. And this again is a case for MapShaper. I've already pre-downloaded that, so I'm just going to drag it in here. It's important that you drag in the entire folder that you, so when you download this from the government website or wherever you're getting your regions from, it will contain not only a shape file, but also a kind of projection file that comes with it and a few other files that I'm not entirely sure what they are. But you can just drag in the whole folder. So I've just packaged it up to make it a bit faster again. And now I will just import all of this. And this is now a shapefile and I want to export it as a GeoJSON file. And so you should be able to just drag it in and then export it and select that it's a GeoJSON. So that would be kind of the first step to try. So I'm just going to create a new one again. Head over to new visualization and start with the blank and drag in my newly created GeoJSON. But now you'll notice that something is a bit off again. And that is that in this case, we can see that it's a multi-polygon and it's pulling through our coordinates, but something's not quite right. We're not getting this mini shape rendered that we normally get when we load a GeoJSON with regions. And so in this case, what you would also have to do, this is what often happens when you're switching from a shapefile to a GeoJSON file, or from a KML file to a GeoJSON file, or sometimes even within a GeoJSON, is that it's using the wrong coordinate system. So the way that you can change that is that you can open the console in MapShaper and type in this command, proj wgs84. This refers to projection, and WGS84 is the kind of projection that we want to use. Now it'll look like it kind of tears your map apart a bit, but that is not going to look like that in Flourish. That's just the visual kind of response of MapShaper to show that it's now in this new coordinate system. So now we've not only transformed it to GeoJSON, but we've also made sure that the coordinate system is the one that we want in Flourish, or the one that renders in Flourish. As we have mentioned in our first slide here, there's also a help doc on this in case you ever run into this issue. So whenever you kind of see the first column is not rendering shapes, but just says polygon or multi-polygon, then you're going to want to use MapShaper to change it to be WGS84, which is the the coordinate system, which kind of tells it how to plot on a map. So if I now try pulling that in again, I think this is the one that I just downloaded, then it should finally display correctly. So now I have my geometry column with my shapes and the subsequent columns that are showing the data that I would like to visualize. So those are some of the common issues that you can encounter when adding your own map regions and how to overcome them using MapShaper, which is a great free and web-based online tool that you should be able to use. And as I mentioned, we have quite a few help docs with MapShaper. You can also do more advanced things with it, which I'm not going to cover in this session, but you can do stuff like merging regions. So for example, melting the US and Canada together so they become kind of one. And we've also supplied all the lines of commands that you would need to run within MapShaper and stuff like that. So feel free to go have a look at this help doc if that's something that you might be interested in doing. Okay, so we just changed the coordinate system and we made sure that it was in GeoJSON and then it all displayed fine. Great, so moving on, just before I dive into custom pop-ups, which is going to be kind of the main part of today's session, I am going to point out a few settings in the projection map that are new or a bit advanced and that might be helpful to learn a bit more about. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is our new region grouping column binding that we've just added. You'll be able to find it as group experimental within the data tab. And if I go back and just get started with a US counties example, which is already available in our blueprints, so you wouldn't have to import this one using the techniques that I just showed earlier, but you would be able to just get started here. And now you can already see how it works, which is that it takes a column with a name and it will draw kind of a line around that name. So in this case, we're actually visualizing the counties and each county has a shape that comes with it. But if I want to group these shapes by state, in this case, would make sense as they're counties, and draw a line around the state, but not the counties, or both in this case, then I can select the state column as my group column. So I'll just quickly show you what it looks like when I remove that. You'll notice that there's now no state outline, and when I select column E as my group, then you get this nice white outline. There's also settings that refer to that called region groups layer settings, so you could change the width maybe, and the color. This can be used for things like this, so kind of showing a higher level of geometry than the one that your features are displaying, but you can also use it to highlight a region or a group of regions. So in this case, I am highlighting Hackney, as that is where I live in London. And the way that I did that when I switch over to the data tab is just that I created an empty column by inserting it, right-clicking and selecting insert column. And then I actually just copied over the word Hackney to this one. So now it will make a group with what is in this column, which in this case is only Hackney. Now maybe I wanted to group together Hackney and Tower Hamlets. So I'll just try and find, sorry. The search has moved to the bottom right, so I need to move around all these webinar things. Okay. Tower Hamlets. Then I could just add that here as well, but I would have to give it the same group name. So maybe I'll give it the name Hackney Tower Hamlets, and then I would give this one the same name, and then you'll see that they will now receive the same outline. So that would be a nice way to maybe focus on those two boroughs if that was something that you were doing in a story. So it's a nice new addition that we've just added, so I thought I would quickly mention it in this webinar. Another thing that we would like to look at is these different bounds settings, which can sometimes be a bit confusing. So normally you can kind of leave it with auto if you want it to just adjust to whatever is currently in view. But there are some situations where you would like to show something in relation to the rest of the world. And to do that, you would just switch to world. Now, basically we're seeing London, but in a world context. So we can actually still make out the red dot there. And then that's how, that doesn't make much sense to do this now because we can't see it anymore. But there are some other cases where it makes more sense or where you would want to switch. I will show another example. We have US counties, which are being showed in the Albers USA projection here. This one doesn't have the bound settings because the Albers USA is specific to the USA. But if I select the different projection, and then I could select world, and then we'll just see the US based on the world. But then I could switch it to auto to make it focus just on what is in the, so kind of the minimum and the maximum that are in the data. It will then focus on those. And you can also specify that further here. I actually don't think I've ever used this, so I probably should not have mentioned that. So yeah, I'm going to figure that out and add that to a help doc or something. But yeah, so those are basically the two bounds that I wanted to show. I rarely make use of the other ones, sorry, so I'm not going to mention them now. But that is that. Okay. So those are region groups and different bound settings. Now I'm going to move on to custom pop-ups, as that is kind of one of the more advanced topics in the projection map that often comes up with customers and users. So we have different options for pop-ups, and I will just quickly open an example that I created for today, and that is this map about where the Flourish team lives. I've added world regions. So I just started with the world blueprint, and then I've added points with a latitude, longitude of each of our employees and an image and their role and a link. Now, ideally, I would like all of this to nicely display in my pop-ups. But if I leave it to kind of auto, it will display like this. So the way that I've supplied the image, by the way, in case you might not have known this, is to just right click and select upload file. And then you can actually upload any image that you have on your computer, and it will upload it to the Flourish server, generate a link. And that is essentially what we have here. You can also supply links that you might have uploaded elsewhere on your server so that you don't have to upload them again. So that's what I've done for these two. And these I grabbed from LinkedIn, haha. So that's how to upload an image. But now, of course, it's not pulling it through as an image. It's pulling it through as text. Because if I go to my point settings and then to my pop-up content settings, that's always at the bottom of the points or regions layer, depending if you're in the points or regions layer, then I can see it's set to auto. So what it will do when it's set to auto is pull through the name and pull through any value columns, and also any columns that have been supplied in the metadata for pop-ups area here. So currently it's pulling those through, but just as lines of text. So if I want to change that, I can switch over to custom content. And now I basically have to rewrite the entire content, but I can use custom HTML and I can style it and I can add image tags and I can add links. So in this case, I would probably start by using the name of the person, which is called Landmark, which is funny, but I'm going to change it to name. And whenever I access a column within these two curly brackets, it will pull through that column. So here we can see it's now pulling through the name of the different people. I might want to bolden that, which I can do with these bold tags. Now it's bold, or I could make it a header and style it. So I could give it maybe, I could double the font based on the base font using EMs or M's. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. Now we can see it's a nice big title. But now if I want to also add an image, I can do that like this. Same, I'm just using HTML, so you will need some basic HTML skills to be able to make use of this. We do also have quite a few help docs that have examples in them that you can use. So you can just copy the code. I'll show those in a moment. But yeah, in this case, I would say image source image, and then again, you could size the image. So this one's quite large now. Also, it's loading them outside of the pop-up. So it might make more sense to upload the image as the background of a div. So I'm just going to head over to my pre-made example and show you that one. I've also added the code that I've used to achieve this, which we will be uploading these slides after the session. And then if you wanted to refer back to it, you can do that then. So now here we can see I nicely was able to add styling, but also a layout. So if I go back to my points layer settings and into the custom content, now I can see I wrapped my entire content in a div with a width of 250. So that means the width of the container will never go beyond 250, or it is exactly 250 pixels. Then I've added the name and I've added the image as a background of a div. And I have added a role and I've added the link. And I've just done all of this with basic HTML and referring back to the data tab and the column names with these curly brackets. And then in this case, I used some styles just to show how you could style something within a style section. An important thing to note here, oh, and by the way, this is the moment that I wanted to introduce Olivia, our new support and content intern who's joined us just 2 weeks ago, last week, not 2 weeks ago. So this is her. You'll be able to explore her in this visualization when you click on our slides later when we upload them. But what I wanted to mention is that when you click on this link within Flourish, that will, oh, it actually shouldn't work, but it will work in the live version. So normally you'll get an error that it can't open that link within the iframe in the editor. But once you've published your visualization, so in this case, I would just click on the publish link here and you click on that again. That seems to be an issue with the template because it should open it in a new tab by default, but I could also just add that here. Target equals underscore blank, and then it should open it in a new tab. So if I do that again, then that, oh, I seem to be in the wrong version or something. Sorry. Just quickly going to check if it took my target blank that I just added. No, it did not. Okay, I'll do that again. I probably have this visualization open in multiple tabs and I just made a change to one of them, but not, and so it was confused. So again, I'm going to republish and open that. And now it should open it in a new tab. I wouldn't be surprised though. There we go. That worked finally. So yeah, that's just an example, as this is a really common use case where you want to give some extra information, you want to add a link, an image, and some layout. So that's how you would approach that. As I said, I will be sharing this example in the slides, but you can also find plenty of examples in our help docs. So we have this one on how to add custom content where we have a few examples for images, for links, for adding that target blank, for videos, and so on and so forth. You can take that to another level by actually even adding charts in your pop-ups. So if you look at this example of the US elections, then I'm just going to go grab that one. I have that in my folder. Then in this case, just give that a sec. Okay, I have pulled through the results from 2020 and the results from 2016 based on a column in the data tab. So again, if I switch to the data here, you'll actually be able to see I'm pulling through D through S in my metadata for pop-ups column binding, which means everything from D all the way across to S I want to make use of. And then within my custom pop-ups code, which in this case will be in the regions layer because I'm not showing points, but I'm showing regions, then I can scroll down and find the custom code, which in this case is quite extensive, as what I'm basically doing is creating a span with a certain width, and that width is based on the vote share. So you can actually create a bar chart based on the percentage in this case. We've added the code for this one as well in our help docs. So if this is something that you would like to do, then you can just search for, I think, charts in pop-ups. Yeah, how to add charts with data from your data tab. Then we have this example, and you can see exactly how that works here. So this is quite kind of a complicated example that I'm not going to walk through in all detail, but essentially what you're doing is drawing a bar with the width from the data tab. Another important or a good one to know about is when you are visualizing multiple columns of data. So if we take this one and I want to pull through this information from that is specific to the column. So here I'm showing not only one value, but actually 10 different points in time. And I've visualized that with a time slider. I did that in the regions layer settings. And then if you scroll down, you can select the control here. So I could also do this as a drop down. And if you're using custom pop-ups, when you do this, I actually just selected the solution basically. So I'm going to head over to this one. And you want to add kind of the data point from a certain time. Then the way that you do that is, again, in the regions layer, because now you have these 10 different columns to choose from. So you don't want to add each and every one separately like this, June and then July and then December. But what you want to do instead, so now it's just pulling through the number for June 2014, in this case 26. I would, of course, add that in a bit of a nicer place, maybe right underneath the title. Then what you can do is pull through value in capitals like that, and then it will always pick up the current value based on the current position in your controls, so from the column that it's currently visualizing. I can use, so now it's 2015, and you can also add the metric so that might make it a bit clearer. So now I'm showing September 2015, but then in a different state, I would maybe be showing December 2014. And now because I'm taking these metric and value shortcuts, it takes it based on the current column. So that's how you achieve that. And I'm realizing that I'm reaching the end of my time, so I'm just going to race through this last one, which we also have a help doc on if you want to go through this again in your own time. But basically it's possible to hide certain content in certain situations. So in this case, I don't have an image for Russia and I don't have additional information for Russia. Whereas for Canada, I have this description and I have an image. So I want to hide those things from Russia and from every country that doesn't have them. And the way that you can do that, I'm just going to go to the solution now so that I'm a bit faster. If I switch to the data tab, what you actually have to do is add an additional column where whenever you don't have a description in this case, or you don't have an image, you would add this no description value. And so here I've added the description for both Canada and the US, and for everything else I don't have one, so I would just add no description instead. And then what I did is in the regions layer, I would go down to the pop-ups again, and I wrapped the entire div containing the image and the description in a div with the class of no description, of the column no description. So then it looks up what is in the column no description. And if that class is no description, then I say hide that div. So in this case, I'm hiding it. All I get is my kind of metric and value. And in this case, I actually have an image and a description, and then it pulls it through. In the same way with custom HTML, you can also add things like scroll bars if your text is too long for a pop-up. I did that by adding a height to my div and giving it an overflow property of scroll. And then you can also add styling so that your scroll bar appears by default, for example. So I'm going to cut it short there and finish because it is 3:30 and we like to keep these sessions short so you can get on with your day. I hope you found this useful. As I mentioned, we will be uploading a recording and slides and the data or GeoJSON files that we used in this session to our training page, which you can find at flourish.studio/training. And this is also where you can see the next sessions. So that was it for today. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.